Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nonprofit Auditor Points. I'm Irina Ryshkova, your nonprofit auditor, and we continue 990 series, where I am explaining what is the tax filing Form 990 means, how to read it, and most misunderstood areas in Form 990. In the previous episode, we covered Part 6, Section A, Form 990, which focuses on governing body and management. That episode was about people, structure, independence, and who is actually in charge of the organization. Today, we will cover Section B of Part 6, which focuses on a governance policy. Very important area. So if the Section A answered the question who is in charge, then Section B answered different but equally important question. Does the organization govern itself intentionally, ethically, and transparently? And to summarize, overall, all Form 990 is designed to be transparent and ethical, to show that nonprofit meets the definition what public expects from the nonprofit, to be ethical and transparent. One of the most common mistakes nonprofit leaders make is assuming that the question in Section B is about employment law or regulatory technicalities. In reality, these questions are about organizational ethics, risk management, and accountability, regardless of the organization's size and staffing structure. Because nonprofits operate very often by taxpayers' money, by public funds. So they are required to be transparent, not risky, and be accountable to the public. Section 6, Part 6, Section B, asks about several specific policies, and we will talk about these policies. These policies are not legally required under the federal law, but the IRS includes those questions for a reason. They are areas of the nonprofit commonly face problems when they do something wrong. So the IRS want to know if nonprofit regulates and mitigate the risks if something goes wrong. The first and most common policy is a conflict of interest policy. Form 990 asks whether the organization has a written conflict of interest policy, whether officers, directors, trustees, and key employees are required to disclose conflicts annually, and whether the organization regularly monitors and enforces compliance with the policy. A very common misconception that the conflict of interest policy is only relevant if conflicts exist. It's not the case. Conflicts are normal. Board members have businesses, family, professional lives. The issues are not whether conflicts exist, but whether they disclosed and managed properly. That's way more important. Another frequent misunderstanding is assuming that the policy counts simply because it exists somewhere else. We're assuming that we have this policy. A very common example would be as a parent organization or fiscal sponsor. Maybe they have it and we assume we have it. For Form 990 purposes, the policy must be, and it's not optional, must be formally adopted by the governing body of the filing organization. So it meaning that the board members should have read it, understood it, voted on that, and documenting that they're accepting this policy and it becomes their governing document. A yes answer in this section signals to the readers that conflicts are acknowledged and managed properly. An unsupported or casual yes can raise more concern than a thoughtful no. So if your nonprofit did not adopt such policy, it's much better to answer truthfully no and develop a policy and answer yes during the next filing period. Another policy that addressed in Section B is a whistleblower policy. The policy is also very commonly misunderstood because sometimes small nonprofit organizations do not have employees, and some leaders, board members saying we don't have employees, so this does not apply to us, and this is incorrect. Whistleblower policy is not about employment status. It's about providing a safe way to report any concern about nonprofit. That might include volunteers, board members, contractors, and everyone else that's involved with the organization. From Form 990 reader's perspective, whistleblower policy signals that organization takes ethics seriously and encourages internal reporting rather than silence. So the problems are addressed in a professional, neutral way, and whistleblower can safely report problems. Another policy in Section B is document retention and destruction policy. This policy governs how long the organization keeps financial records, contracts, donor records, grant documentation, board minutes, and other important materials, how those records destroyed and when no longer needed. This is not because of bureaucracy. This is about preparedness, again, transparency. Organizations without clear retention practices often struggle during the audit process, grant reviews, legal inquiries, or leadership transitions. We very often see when there's a change in leadership, policy cannot be located. From external perspective, having a document retention policy signals that the organization understands its record-keeping responsibilities and takes management information intentionally and responsibly. Section B also indicates whether the organization has a proper policy of setting executive compensation. Very important section. This question ties directly how the organization demonstrates reasonableness and oversight when determining compensation to the top leadership. The IRS is not asking whether compensation is high or low. It's asking if the decision-making process has a structured way to determine such compensation. If such compensation was discussed, independent board members voted on, and the comparable data was used. Even if the compensation is low, but it was not approved properly, not through intentional process, it's still not going to be perceived as the proper internal process of the organization. So to summarize, even if the compensation is modest, the absence of clear policies can raise questions about governance discipline. Another important question in Section B relates to how Form 990 reviewed. I do receive questions from the nonprofit leaders all the time saying how we should review Form 990. The IRS asks nonprofits whether a copy of Form 990 was provided to governing body before the filing and how it was reviewed. Importantly, we need to know that there is no federal law that requiring board to review Form 990. However, from the public perspective, answer yes signal that nonprofit is engaged properly, take the functions of accountability and awareness seriously, and that information is informing public that governing body understands information it puts out there about nonprofit. When the Form 990 is not reviewed by the board, it suggests that the leadership may be disconnected from the organization public disclosures. Very important to have some review process of the Form 990. To summarize, Section B is very important in a Form 990. And if one of the answers is no, it does not automatically create the problem. But what creates a problem if the answer is yes, but it's not supported by the reality. But what is wonderful for nonprofits, if you have any answers no, the board might consider to review its policy and procedures and maybe implement required policy and procedures so the next reporting period, the answer will be yes. For the board members and executive leadership, Section B should be prompt for decisions. If the organization answered no to policy question, leadership should understand why. In some cases, no answer might be appropriate. In others, might signal an opportunity to improve governance. This policy not only about internal control, this policy about how the organization presents itself to donors, funders, regulators, and public. Part 6, Section B tells readers whether governance is intentional or accidental, if the board is proactive or reactive. Taken together with Section A, this part of Form 990 becomes a powerful statement about the organization maturity, meaning that organization can indicate that it understands its governance and leads the nonprofit from intention and being proactive leaders for the organization. In the next episode, we will move away from governance into another area that is frequently created discomfort and confusions for nonprofit organizations. It's compensation reporting, which is very unique and very specific for Form 990. And you can see it in Part 7, Schedule J, and why misunderstanding in this area might create overall risk for nonprofit. Thank you so much. Looking forward to see you for your next snap. Be safe and have a wonderful week.